In 2021, Pastec Games released Curse of the Dead Gods. It was often compared to the first Hades, but while these games shared the same genre, they are both action roguelike lights. The combat in Curse of the Dead Gods is much slower and way more punishing. It's honestly closer to Dark Souls than to Hades, and I found it much more satisfying. It's a great game that falls just short of being excellent. Enter September 2024, where Pastec Games releases Ravenswatch, yet another action roguelike, but this time with a very different focus. The Ravenswatch is like the Avengers of fairy tales, a band of heroes from old legends banding together to fight a great evil. So instead of the isolating dark chambers of an ancient Aztec temple, you get to explore the countryside. Unfortunately, you are still pushing back the corruption of some nightmarish entity. That part didn't change, so you shouldn't expect too many bright happy colors, but it's all a bit less depressing. This is important because Ravenswatch, unlike most of the other games in this genre, is built to be a co-op experience. My perspective on this game comes from spending about 80% of my playtime in a group of 2, with some games as 3 or solo, and only like 1, maybe 2 games as the maximum group size of 4. You can of course also queue with random people, but success in Ravenswatch requires at least a basic level of coordination, which is far from guaranteed with random matchmaking. Before you get into the game, to differentiate the players, you are forced to make a choice. And it's not something mundane, like picking a starter weapon. In Ravenswatch, you pick an entire character. And these are not classes, slight variations, these are all entirely unique playstyles. You can think of it like picking a hero in a MOBA. You get 5 abilities, plus an ultimate, and these are some of the coolest designs I've ever played with. The most normal of these is probably Beowulf, reimagined from the ancient Anglo-Saxon poem. He's your fairly standard warrior. He has a big sword, a shield, and a baby dragon on his shoulder that helps him scorch his enemies. His attacks are powerful, but slow. You feel heavy. At least until you get to the point at which you can start permanently dashing while shooting fireballs out of your ass. Scarlet is a twist on Little Red Riding Hood, and she fulfills the rogue archetype. She's quick, she can cheat her cooldowns, or stealth for guaranteed critical hits, and she even has a combo point system that you need to play around for maximum damage output. Nothing you've not seen before, right?
Begone, foul creature!
Turns out, in this interpretation of the fairy tale, the little girl is also the big bad wolf, to whom you transform during the night to bite, slash, rip and ravage anything in your path with, of course, entirely new attacks and abilities. So the developers decided for Scarlet to be one of the 4 starting characters that will not overwhelm the player with its complexity, and it's 2 characters in one. The Snow Queen feels a bit like a ranged Beowulf. She is all about devastating spells that require some time to cast, which leaves her very vulnerable. Miss position and you will get punished. But if you time your combos just right, you can blow up entire packs of enemies with ease, which is very satisfying. She also has perhaps the most powerful voice acting. For the last default character, since we have a warrior, rogue and a mage, you'd expect something like a healer, maybe, but instead, Pied Piper is something else. He commands an ever-growing horde of rats, which you can sick on your enemies, while you pummel them with musical notes. He also has some of the best supportive abilities, which can debuff in large areas. He's definitely the most versatile of the starting 4, allowing you to focus on whatever part of his playstyle is needed by your team. Then there's Aladdin. His unique flavor is his ability to make limited wishes to the djinn in his lamp for powerful boons. The most popular one, especially in multiplayer, because it applies to each person, is unsurprisingly the wish for more money. Other than that, Aladdin fights with his enchanted scimitars. He can even let them spin in place while he himself runs around, unable to attack. And once you get your ultimate, you can even ride on his famous magic carpet. Melusine is when I realized that this game is sick. She is a siren. She uses water-based magic to defeat her foes, and, unlike everyone else, she does not have a normal basic attack. Instead, when you left-click, she begins singing. This means you can no longer move, but you get to control a will-o-wisp with your mouse, which becomes the center point for all of your abilities. It might sound weird, but it actually feels very intuitive. You'll get used to it quickly, and it's such a fun playstyle. Then there's Geppetto, the master woodcarver of Pinocchio fame. By himself, he's a frail, weak fighter, but he can create an army of puppets that will do the fighting for him. He's all about dancing on the edge of active combat and only sending your puppets into the fray at the right time, where they won't get one shot and have time to deal some serious damage. This is, without a doubt, the coolest take on a summoner I've ever played in an action game, and it plays so different from all the other characters. Sun Wukong is the definition of high risk, high reward. He's a melee fighter with access to 2 stances. In blue stance, he heals from all of his attacks. In the red stance, he deals 100% more damage, but unfortunately at the same time, he also takes 100% more damage. This character, more than any other, rewards knowledge and mastery of the game's attack patterns. His defense ability blocks all incoming damage, but only for half a second. If you do manage to block any damage, it fully resets its cooldown. So in theory, Wukong should be invulnerable. But in practice, it is so easy to panic and make just one single mistake. And if you get caught in your red stance, you can just die instantly. The final character for the full release was Carmilla, the lesser known vampire from classic literature. To use her abilities, you need blood, either your own or preferably of your enemies. Her playstyle is about using her fast, agile melee attacks to build up a large blood reserve so that you can fully unleash your potential through these blood-consuming spells. You are constantly diving in and out of combat, trying to find the correct windows to be aggressive or to create some distance. She just feels so good to play. Carmilla is my favorite. And we are still not done, because last month Pastec Games added 2 more characters in a free DLC, and it's none other than Romeo and Juliet. Romeo is a fencer, Juliet just straight up has a gun, and they are designed to be played together. Almost all of their abilities have synergies that can only be activated by the other. Similarly, if one of them dies, it breaks the other one's heart, and they both die. Their ultimate is especially hilarious. They rush towards each other and begin to dance, becoming invulnerable and dealing damage to passing enemies. The twist is, both players control the direction, and the slower you go, the more you fight each other, the less damage you deal. And it's much harder to cooperate on this than you would think. These 2 really test your teamwork and communication in unique ways the others just don't. It's absolutely incredible design. Romeo and Juliet can also be played without each other, some of their abilities slightly change to make it work, and it's fine, especially Juliet is self-sufficient, but you are not playing with their full kits. So that's the full roster of 11 heroes you can play in this game. I think thematically they nailed it. The folklore, ancient legend inspirations are clearly felt in both visuals and gameplay, and I was excited to try each hero out. It felt novel, because when's the last time you played as Geppetto or Melusine in a video game? They all play so different from each other that you are almost guaranteed to find some that fit your playstyle perfectly, and also some that will feel alien to understand and will take some work to get used to. But I ended up enjoying all of them. One thing that might not be immediately obvious from watching the gameplay is just how polished Ravenswatch is. I knew I would like this game within seconds of loading into my first run, because the character control feels so crisp, the attacks have weight behind them, the voice acting and the special effects are superb, they greatly enhance the satisfaction from combat, the soundtrack is beautiful, Ravenswatch just feels good. This is something that Pastec Games excels at. You can see it in all their previous titles. But, unfortunately, just like Curse of the Dead Gods, Ravenswatch is held down by some bizarre, major design flaws. So the majority of games in this genre are room-based. You clear a room of enemies, you get a reward, and then you choose a new room. Maybe it's an elite enemy, maybe it's a lot of gold, maybe it's a shop. It's a tried and tested method that works. Ravenswatch instead tries a new approach. It's sort of open world. You spawn on a large map and you can go explore wherever you wish. Now, this doesn't really work by itself, because in a roguelike, you gain power by killing enemies, getting experience, acquiring gold and items, and usually this power gain is capped by the amount of rooms. In Ravenswatch, you could just full clear the entire map, and even if you run into difficult enemies, you could just infinitely kite them through the large open space, slowly whittling them down. So, how do you fix this problem? Well, Pastec Games solves it by introducing a time limit. The first huge red flag. There is a time limit of 18 minutes for each act, after which you are forcefully teleported to a big boss fight, which thankfully does not have a time limit. If you manage to defeat the boss, you proceed to the next act with the same rules, and there are 3 acts in total. A time limit obviously has huge implications on the way you should play the game. You are in a race to gain as much power as possible, and every mistake you make will slow you down. If anyone ever dies, you have to spend time picking them back up. Even if you simply miss your abilities, that's 15 extra seconds you will never get back. Making a mistake is obviously already punishing. It gives the enemies more time to attack and kill you, but with the time limit, there is an additional punishment. Your mistakes start costing you rewards, because clearing the entire map in 18 minutes is not an easy task at all, and losing out on rewards means losing out on player power. And if you are still following me, you might start noticing the problem with this design. There is a sort of snowballing effect in the game. If you are struggling, you will waste more time, fail to clear parts of the map, and fall behind the power curve. Which means you are then going to keep falling behind, because it's very likely going to repeat in the next 2 acts. On the flip side, if you are doing well, you will gain almost all of the possible power and likely keep doing well in the following acts. In the background, you've been watching me and my friend fight the Act 3 boss on a run, where we both made pretty big mistakes in the first act, but then started playing well enough to survive. It takes us well over 5 minutes to defeat the boss. Now let's have a look at a run where we both did great in the first act. This fight was 15 seconds, and it's not even a huge outlier for good runs. It's actually on the slow side. The power level differences can be massive, but that's not really the problem. High rolling a super powerful build is fun and exciting. It's something to chase. The problem is how utterly suffocating and hopeless it feels to fall behind further and further, as it keeps taking you longer and longer to clear enemies, and you are watching the timer mercilessly tick forward. Every attack in the game is dodgeable, so you can overcome this with player skill, but if you are struggling, it can feel like the game just kind of wants you to die already and start a new run. Unfortunately, this is not even the biggest problem this open world system creates. So after you spawn in, you leave the safe zone, the timer starts, and you will very quickly run into the first pack of enemies roaming around. So naturally, you will start killing them, right? That's the point of the game. Well, no, it's not. This is a classic noob mistake. You see, Ravenswatch is still very much room-based. In each act, there is a limited amount of points of interest that are randomly generated around the map. These are things like gold crystals, chests with magical objects, experience shrines, the usual roguelike stuff. Your goal is to clear as many of these as possible. These are by far where you gain the most power. Fighting anywhere else is usually a complete waste of time, unless you've already cleared the entire map. So when you leave your spawn and you run into the first pack of enemies, what you do is you simply run past them. You ignore them. This is, of course, completely unintuitive. It is the opposite of what you will do as a new player, so it makes the whole learning process way more difficult, since you will not be getting as much power as you should, despite you not really doing anything wrong. It's simply a complete design failure, because I cannot imagine this is the intended way to play the game by the developers. But after only a couple of runs, you will realize this is very obviously the only way to play the game. And unfortunately, this is still not the biggest problem this system creates. So, you are on a time limit, you are trying to speedrun, you run through every enemy pack until you finally get to the point of interest. So, now it's time to finally fight, correct? Well, no, of course not. Because right now, since you ran through 6 different enemy packs to get here, most of them are still following you, still aggroed onto you. So actually, the first thing you should do is to keep running as far away as you can from the entrance. This will ideally make the enemies lose interest in you and leash back to the place they spawned in. I say ideally because this does not always work. The leash rules are a bit arcane. Sometimes they just refuse to leash back and you will have to waste precious time killing them, like these annoying healers that fully heal this elite treant we've been fighting for half a minute. Sometimes they will even bug out behind a wall and keep you flagged in combat despite not being anywhere close, which means that you can't interact with your rewards. You have to go find the enemy and kill it, or come back later, once it, hopefully, actually loses aggro. Sometimes they can even attack you from outside the little arenas, you could call them rooms, that spawn in for specific points of interest. It is absolutely infuriating having to deal with this. I'm getting frustrated just talking about this, because I don't get it. All of these problems are obviously made much worse in multiplayer, since it's a lot more difficult to coordinate and pull as little enemies as possible, and then drop their aggro in the most efficient way possible. There's just not a single positive to this open world system. It is awful. And it's especially a shame because it's sticking out like a sore thumb in contrast to the rest of the game that is so masterfully crafted. Thankfully, once you understand that this is how the game works and you learn to play around these weird hostile mechanics, they become much less of an annoyance. And the moment-to-moment gameplay is so good that you learn to tolerate it. Next, let's talk about difficulty and replayability. Ravenswatch has 0 meta progression, as in incremental, permanent upgrades to player power that you unlock the more you play. Things like plus 3% health or plus 3% more damage, that doesn't exist here. The only progress you can make is unlocking all of the heroes, which happens very quickly, and then when you play a hero, you unlock different upgrades for their abilities, so that your future runs will have more variety. And that's all there is to it. I love this approach. The majority of games with meta progression fail to make it interesting, it's simply not fun. Instead, your meta progression in Ravenswatch is you, your skill. This is a difficult game. You can take a lot of damage very quickly, and there are very limited ways to heal. Enemies have well telegraphed attacks, but they come in such high numbers that it can be difficult to keep track of. You will die a lot learning the game. You will die a lot even once you learn the game. But you will feel yourself getting better every run you play, and the feeling you get when you finally learn how to best combo your abilities, when one of the heroes finally clicks, or you finally overcome a tough boss fight, that feeling is infinitely more satisfying than any meta progression can ever be. Let's fucking go, Thunder! As far as difficulty options go, Ravenswatch keeps it simple. You get 4 of them, it's basically easy, normal, hard, and the 4th one is aptly called Nightmare. Each of these is a big difficulty spike to overcome, and the last 2 difficulties even have a special Act 4 with the real final boss fight. So if you want to see everything the game has to offer, you will need to get good. To me, this is replayability. I enjoy mastering each hero and trying to beat the highest difficulties on them. This is something I respect about past games. There's been a trend, especially in indie games, to be able to craft your own difficulty, which is honestly the most lazy, off-putting difficulty system imaginable, especially when combined with meta progression. These are fake systems with objectively correct ways to scale the difficulty that ask you to be the game designer for your own experience and optimize the fun out of it. And it's not a question of accessibility. Ravenswatch has extra modifiers like removing the time limit, massively buffing your health and XP gains. You can make the game as easy or hard as you want, but it's important that these are extra modifiers you can play around with, while the core difficulties are predefined. In terms of variety between runs, this is one of the most common criticisms based on the negative Steam reviews. One part of that is enemy variety, which I don't really get. There are different enemies in each act, they are fun to fight with different strengths and weaknesses. I find that to be enough. But there is only one boss at the end of each act. There are slight variations of them. They will use different sets of attack patterns, so it's more like 1.5 bosses at the end of each act, but it would definitely be nice to have more. That being said, I still always look forward to them. They are fun fights, and it feels nice to not have a time limit. In terms of how different playing the same character feels, there is less variety than in most other similar games, because you are not playing a blank slate. You already have set abilities, and those will mostly stay the same. They might get extra effects, extra functionalities, but you will never see Beowulf firing beams out of his eyes, or Geppetto making pirouettes with a sword. The way it works is that each level you get a choice of 2 talents that improve your abilities. These are unique, predefined for each character. There are 26 of them in total, and you can only get 10 maximum per run. As an example, Juliet's power makes her line up a shot, and if you time it perfectly, it critically hits. One of the talents lets you hold the ability for a second, slightly less powerful shot. Another one makes the perfectly timed shot ignite. It's stuff like that. Most of these feel good and impactful to get. I think the system works well. Then the other part of the player's power progression are magical objects. These are generic upgrades, the same for everyone. A lot of them conditionally increase your stats, damage, or survivability. Some of the rarer ones can even give you more charges for your abilities, things like death protection or even extra forms of scaling. But ultimately, these boil down to just trying to get your damage stat as high as possible, because it turns out 400% increased damage is a lot better than 100% increased damage with some extra ability charges. And I think this contributes to players feeling the runs can feel a bit samey. It's again more about mastery of the game and figuring out in what way you like to play each hero, rather than an ocean-wide amount of wild options. But since you get 11 very different heroes, I still think there is tons of replayability. I am over 100 hours deep and I'm still loving the game. It still feels fresh. Yes, you heard that right. I do love Ravenswatch, despite what might have sounded like very harsh critique of the way it does its open world. I think if you want to play solo, I would still definitely recommend it, but there are a lot of good games like this out there. But if you have at least one friend to play with, it's the best co-op action roguelike on the market. Even with all of its faults and not always the best quality of life, like For example, when you are picking your upgrades or rewards, the game does not pause in multiplayer. And for the reasons I've described, you cannot really afford to spend a minute carefully reading and analyzing your options. So it is yet another obstacle for new players that eventually goes away once you become familiar with all the ability upgrades. God, these developers are clearly so talented. It's crazy. Twice now they've been this close to making like a Hall of Fame perfect action roguelike. And I hope they keep going, because it's clear to me it's only a matter of time, and I'll be waiting.